this is very important to us. By the way, my name is Juan Hernandez, a state conservationist for NRCS in Florida. And the intent of this webinar is to give you the basics of what we'll be offering for assistance to our producers in the state of Florida impacted by all three hurricanes, Helene, Debby, and Milton. We are setting aside $26 million immediately so that we have a sign up as we speak, so that you will be able to start applications coming into your field offices. And we will be collecting applications until December 20th. We'll be making batching periods of decision points on funding every 2 weeks, but we will have further discussions of that mechanics later in the conference. So today we will have a little discussion into some of the basic practices that we are going to be offering in this sign up. We're not intended to have covering all the details, but what we want to make certain is that we do have the ability to give you an intro into what practices we're going to cover, what are the things that you will have to do. And first and foremost, and I wanted to reiterate it through the call, the importance that if you do not have a track and farm number or have establish a record with Farm Service Agency, to do so immediately. That will be a vital part of the whole process that is outside NRCS. So that's something that you must secure as soon as you can, so that if you have a pending application or you're going to, take advantage of that field office visit and start working with FSA to establish your records. A few of the practices that we are doing, they are practices we have done for many, many years, but at the same time, there are practices such as the bivalve aquaculture gear and biofouling control, which I have to even read. These are practices that are brand new to us. And this is something that I want to let you know, right? That we may not have a very precise product, but we're starting this year and we're going to fine tune this as we go. We just wanted to make sure that we discuss what we have available now. That does not mean that in the future we'll be able to adjust these practices and how we can make them more fit into our operations, but we want to make certain that we're going to explain today what is available for this storm. And we may have to have further discussion in the future of anything that it might not be a good fit and how we can work with it. The same goes to all these pending practices that we're going to discuss today. And improvements to the practice, we will be all ears of how we can improve the execution of these. Now, many of them will include a waiver, which it will allow you to start, and you don't have to wait for a lot of these paperwork to catch up with you. Now, that is not a guarantee of funding, but at least we are not holding you back in to do all the work that you have to do. It's just, we don't want to be, it's just an interference for you to clean up and to start doing what you need to do. Very important, and that reminded me, the obstruction removal aspect of these. In the past, NRCS have offered assistance for those, but this year, in order to avoid redundancies, we're going to be relying on FSA. So Farm Service Agency, with the Emergency Conservation Program, which is open right now, that you can sign up for it, you can actually get assistance for the removal of all this obstruction and whatnot. So please, if obstruction removal is part of your recovery, and please apply to the ECP in your respective Farm Service Agency offices. But with that, today we will go practice by practice, and we will have a basic explanation of what it will be required from you to apply every one of these practices. We want you to ask us many questions, so that, because the intent is, this is for you to understand how these practices work, how will be executed, and procedurally what you need to do. So that is the intent of this webinar. And with that, I will yield the floor to Bianca Diaz. She is our SRC for the state of Florida, the State Resource Conservationist. With that, please, again, ask as many questions, because this is for you and it's about you. So let's make sure that you have, that we answer your questions so that you're ready to start working with this recovery work. With that, have a great day, and thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, Juan, for those remarks. As Juan emphasized, we will be taking questions today. If you can put them in the chat, we will be monitoring, and we also have representatives from each of our departments that is here to support us in answering those questions. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to transfer word over to Bianca. She'll be presenting for ECS today.
Good morning, everyone. Can someone please confirm they can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us today on this call. The intent as we go over this is to just kind of go over the strategy and the practices that we're offering financial and technical assistance to support disaster emergency events. We're going to go through the slides and maybe if you don't mind going one forward. So the first thing we want to provide to the public is the designated area, right? What is the area that has been designated as applicable counties to receive assistance under emergency efforts? The map in front of you shows the boundaries of all the counties for which we are accepting applications to provide support for emergency efforts. Thank you. So we're going to go over the practices. As Juan mentioned, my name is Bianca Diaz. I'm the State Resource Conservationist. I oversee the technical team for NRCS Florida. And here in the call with me is the team. So I really appreciate all of them for making themselves available. We have a couple of practices that we're offering for assistance. The first one is high tunnel systems. It's an enclosed structure, polycarbonate, plastic, or fabric that is used to protect crops from excessive rainfall, wind, sun, cold, and extended growing season. Our purpose, and you'll see purpose on a lot of the slides, is really how we justify the need for it, right? Everything that we do as an agency is tied into a resource concern or an environmental benefit of what we do. So our purpose for high tunnel is to improve plant health and vigor. This practice is made available for cropland, and it has a lifespan of 5 years. So the lifespan for us is the period of time for which once we assist with a practice, it is expected to be functional for, right? So there's some operation and maintenance expected out of anyone who does work with us, and that is what the lifespan serves for. So for high tunnel systems on emergency efforts, this is only applicable for existing structures for which the hurricanes had damaged them. So just wanted to provide that clarification. And please, as we go through the presentation, if there are any specific questions about the functionality of anything that we're touching, feel free to ask away.
So we did get one question. They said, where can we find local Florida vendors for high tunnels? Anyone we can speak with?
We can definitely make available certain sources. In that capacity, I do want to say that we do not sponsor any specific vendor over the next one. So we can definitely make sure that we share the information that we have, but it's not all inclusive. So I just want to be clear on that. Got it, thumbs up. The next practice that we have is mulching. For this specific purpose, again, is applicable on cropland, is what we call a management practice. Is anything that is just a 1 year lifespan. So we expect it to serve for 1 year. For mulching, the intent of the practice is to make sure that, we can apply some sort of plant residue or any other suitable material on the surface of the land. And for this specific practice, there's a lot of different benefits that you can get out of it, right? It can improve moisture management. It can control erosion. It can improve plant productivity by, managing the moisture and the temperature of the soil. Maintain or increase organic matter content, depending on the type of material that you're incorporating into the soil. And then reduce emission of particulate matter. Nutrient management. For nutrient management, this is all looking at applying the nutrients that the plant being grown requires. It looks at different components. This is applicable to cropland for the purpose of reducing emissions in greenhouses. That's the focus as an agency that we're claiming. And this is to be aligned into our climate smart efforts as an agency. This goes into applying application of one-time nutrient is not applicable to this. And just to be clear, this is one application is really focusing on when you're doing a seeding and you need to do application of nutrients. This is not the intent of this recovery. For nutrient management, for this type of efforts, we're looking at making sure that those impacted crops receive the nutrient application that will help them thrive under the conditions that they were impacted, right? It's looking at the right time, the right rate, under the right conditions for the application to happen. And then we have pest management conservation system, applicable also for cropland. In the intent of recovery, this is really looking at the IPC, the individual cover protection for citrus. So this will be only applicable for existing citrus. If anyone is trying to do a new planting, this is not necessarily considered for that purpose. This is plants that were damaged or trees that were damaged for which protection is needed. And this is applicable for younger trees. So any trees between 1 and 4 years old. Woody residue treatment. This is applicable on, we have different land uses. We're going to be touching in generality. So we have pasture, rangeland, and anyone with a forest land would benefit of this conservation practice standard. The intent of it is to, remove any material that has been like limbs, trees, snags, anything that was damaged because of the hurricane. This helps on removing that material from those fields. We put on the slide the different damages categories, which is what we're using based on Florida Forest Service recommendations. So it's just to give you perception of how we are assessing those damages at this point. And then tree shrub establishment. This is really a supporting practice for the forest land. So if you have any location for which the damages were sustainable, that they were too big, and there's the need to reestablish vegetation and new tree plantings, that is something that we would do supporting woody residue, right? You go in, you clean the material, you remove it from on site, you manage it, and then you go back, and if we need to do site prep, and then in order to do the tree planting, that is something that we can also provide assistance on. No, you're fine. Thank you. That this specific conservation practice for us is very new in the state, not necessarily in the agency, but we have bivalve aquaculture gear and biofueling control. This is really intended for shellfish operations, clam, oysters. That's the majority of the focus for this recovery effort. It's really driven into managing biofueling, right? The recycling of the gear, the disposal of the gear. To be clear, is not necessarily driven into buying new gear. It's really to incentivize the labor that we take to include those management practices. So anyone who's interested in receiving assistance for recovery efforts, the conversations, the things that you should know, that you should come prepared to have the conversations with our field staff, are mostly driven into, what is the type of crop that you're growing? Is it oysters? Is it clams? How many bivalves do you typically plant? Do you typically see? My apologies. And what is the number or the expected number? Is it a self-certification that you're planning on growing on a yearly basis? So things like that. How are you currently managing that gear? How frequent are you biofueling? Are you doing the management? Those are the information that as a baseline, the field staff will need to know in order for them to better identify the way to proceed and support you. At the same time, understanding where your lease is at, having that information accessible, also making sure that if you're doing rinsing of the gear, that you can identify where the locations where the rinsing is happening so that we can capture before and after. Because for everything that we do, we're trying to see a change in management. And that's really the intent of this, to document that capacity. And now I'm gonna lend the floor to Jason Strand. He's part of the engineering staff with NRCS to cover the other practices that we're offering.
Thank you, Bianca. Yeah, the first one, we'll discuss is what we consider, emergency animal mortality. Where Hurricane Helene hit, there's quite a few, chicken farms in that area. And, some of those, houses got destroyed, and there was, thousands of chickens that perished. So there is what we call mass event of animal mortality. So we've got to practice, conservation practice standard 368, emergency animal mortality management. So we're going to assist with those, producers that lost the chickens, to basically dispose of them, to meet our standard. Obviously, we're going to provide an early start waiver. And there are several setbacks, and one of them, one of the precautions is it can't be any disposal within the 100-year floodplain. That's number one. And there's some additional setbacks, distance to potable wells, distance to property lines. Can't be buried in a high water table soil, can't be buried in the water table, an existing water table there. So there's several other criteria that's not listed on this slide. But if you've lost any animals, please contact the local field office, and so we can get jump on those right away, because obviously these animals can't just be sitting there if they've got killed during the hurricanes. At this moment, we're not aware of any mass mortality events related to Hurricane Milton. So if there is, then that we'll kind of maybe readjust our thought process on this. But right now, we're predominantly looking at the poultry farmers in the north part of the state right now. And so that's kind of where we're focusing our efforts on. Okay, Libby. The next one I'm going to talk about is center pivot irrigation systems. Again, where Hurricane Helene hit, we have quite a few center pivot irrigation systems. Our understanding, we're talking about maybe 500 plus center pivots got damaged and or destroyed. So we're going to try to assist those producers with repairing or replacing their center pivots. If we're looking at maybe just one or two spans that got damaged and the actual center pivot can be repaired, that's an option. We will, try to assist just with maybe a section of it that got damaged. Still gonna have to meet our standard. It doesn't matter if that, it met 5 years ago or something when it was installed. It's still gonna have to meet it, the repaired part. Now, if it's greater than 15 years old, 15 years is the lifespan of an irrigation system, a sprinkler irrigation system, according to NRCS. So if it's greater than 15 years old, we're going to require the producer to install a new center pivot, whether it's just a partial damage or not. So that's something we're, need to be aware of. But if it's less than 15 years old, then, we can maybe just repair a portion of it. Now if it's greater, the damage is greater than 50% of the center pivot, and it's, less than 15 years old, we were still going to recommend you replace the whole pivot. Not going to require you, but we'd recommend it just from a cost standpoint. It's not very cost effective to try to repair majority of the pivot versus replace the whole thing. But obviously this has to be an irrigated land, must be an existing operable center pivot, before the hurricane. And we'll have to do a site visit and make sure it's, it appears there's hurricane damage. And the ones I've seen is pretty obvious. When it's on its side or the wheels are sticking up, that's pretty good indicator that the hurricane damaged the pivot. And that's all I have related to center pivots or animal mortality.
All right, there are some questions in the chat. Whoever wants to answer, are AGI limits applicable to all of these programs?
Yes, they are.
Okay, perfect. And then, as a couple people asked, this PowerPoint will be posted later today on our website, and this meeting is being recorded, so the whole thing will be posted.
Any other questions or comments before we transition to programs?
I saw a question of the coordination between FSA or FDACS. So at this point with FSA, NRCS and FSA are coordinating to avoid, to the greatest extent, the duplication, but they are two completely separate applications. And what NRCS is thriving to do is to offer financial assistance in practices that FSA's program do not, are able to provide that specific assistance. A good example is, for example, cleaning up your forest land from the hurricane debris. That is a practice that is strictly isolated to NRCS only. From what we, FSA actually cannot offer financial assistance only to clean up your forest land unless you're doing tree plantings, right? So that is the only way they'll do it. But if you're only seeking to do that, NRCS will be the only program. So that's what we, answering, it's a long-winded way, but we are trying to avoid that duplication of efforts so that you will know where to go depending on what are your needs. Now, with the Department of Ag, the assistance that they seem to be more independent, and we do not have a significant coordination. We do know what they are seeking to do in some areas, but we do not have a full window as of what programs FDACS will be in fact offer and funding and whatnot. That is something that, of course, I see as an improvement, but I can assure you within the federal family, we have coordinated who is going to be assisting what based on your needs. And I hope that I can certainly follow up with more specific questions.
Thank you, Juan. Are there any other questions?
And Jessica, please, I mean, I will gladly follow up for the benefit of the meeting. So did that answer, or would you, I will gladly hear from you as of how, if that answer your question. Maybe you're muted.
I am muted. Sorry about that one.
No.
I know that there was a program announced specifically for center pivots that came out of the office I am currently employed by, the Office of Ag Water Policy. So I just wasn't sure. I'm not working on that program at all. And I'm joining today just to kind of, just to learn about what NRCS is up to and how they're working to help farmers, because I know you guys are. And just curious, like I'm pretty new to the department, so just kind of curious how all the different agencies are working together or coordinating, if they are, on some of these programs.
No, that's a great point.
You.
That's a great question. And we do have a significant level of at least awareness and coordination with the Florida Forest Service. Ag water policies is a bit different, but no doubt that we will follow up. And Jason Strength, if you can maybe follow up with that, just to at least understand what are their parameters and they understand ours, so that if we encounter clients that do not fit our program and vice versa, that we can refer them to each other as we see fit. So that's how I see the benefit of this coordination, that we may have clients that they may have AGI challenges or whatnot, that then we can refer them to the state. So that's a great point, Jessica, and we will follow up, and I will have Jason Strength following up with the ag water policy. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
The floor is open, so we might as well, if you have any other questions, I know that you're writing them and they're very valuable to write them in case that we need to specifically follow up. I saw early on somebody ask about supply of high tunnels, and sadly, we do not keep necessarily a list of contractors anymore because it was really difficult to keep it updated, and some allegations of preferential, like giving preference to contractors versus others. So we avoid keeping a ongoing list of suppliers, but many field offices can tell you what they have seen and heard from other clients in the past executing and doing these practices. But we per se do not keep a list of these contractors. I don't know. Huh? Yeah, no, so that's it.
And we do welcome questions, like people can unmute themselves and ask away too. It's just the chat is as people do present topics that we have an opportunity to not miss out on any question.
All right, and I will transfer the floor over to Amber. She will be presenting for programs.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amber Till. I am the Assistant State Conservationist for Financial Assistance Programs, and I will just give you an overview of the disaster assistance available from the perspective of financial assistance. So next slide, please.
Sorry about that, everyone. Just a few minutes, technical problem.
Did the audio went out?
Must have,
I can hear
I
you.
cannot hear anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I can just hear you, Juan.
Maybe it's okay. So let me continue entertaining you while State Office join. So what we can go over some of the questions that I see on the chat. And guys, believe me, I am able to continue because I'm in the Funiac Springs, and I know that the State Office continue to be riddled with network challenges. So let me see. Can you speak about the damage to IPCs? But hold on, PowerPoint is moving.
Okay, next slide, please.
Juan, we should be good. We apologize for the technical difficulties.
Oh, I already told them, yeah, that our network is just catastrophic in the State Office. So I was just reading, can you speak about the damage to IPCs? And will it be for new bags or for the labor to put them back on? So can you go back and explain the how the IPC and the nutrient management and the whole thing, or where do we go with the bags? Actually, the specific question is new bags.
I'm gonna take that one.
Please do.
So yes, the IPC, so for the individual protective covers for citrus, our effort is to try to help producers replace any IPCs that had been already installed and were basically blown away or ripped off by the winds of the hurricane. In order for us to help, we will have to bundle the practice with nutrient management, and it may sound a little different, but the reason is that bundling that practice with nutrient management gives us access to additional funding. And in the case of IPCs, when the citrus groves are have the disease, they have to change the nutrient management plan, and they have to change the amount of nutrients that they, both the management and the amount of nutrients that get applied. If you could keep the trees healthy, you could maintain, what would have been the conventional nutrient management plan. So basically we are the nutrient management is a practice, it's considered a climate smart practice for NRCS, which falls on a different category of practices that can we have additional funding available for. So that is the why the bundling. So, but to answer the specific question, it is meant to help replace any bags that were blown or ripped off. Existing. For new plantings, if anybody's interested in doing a new planting, we still have IPCs available. You have to apply through regular EQIP. We've had that. We offered that last year, and we will be offering again this year. So for new plantings, the sign up cutoff date is this Friday, November 1st. And we did work with the Florida Citrus Mutual to so that information was sent out to as many citrus growers as possible. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'll reintroduce myself. I'm not sure if the mic was on at that point. My name is Amber Till. I'm an Assistant State Conservationist for Financial Assistance Programs. So I'm going to talk about our funding, the available funding to support disaster assistance. So we have the EQIP program, which is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And we are making available just around $26 million to support disaster assistance. The sign-up period, it's opened October 18th. It extends through December 20th. So we're utilizing a process. It's called Act Now. This process is intended to allow NRCS to quickly make funding decisions so that when an application is submitted, that can be considered for pre-approval more quickly than normal. So normally we batch our applications, we take it at one date, and then we evaluate everything together. And then applications compete for financial assistance based on a rank order. With the Act Now process, we can evaluate those applications as they are received. And then we, the field office is going to evaluate them, assess them, rank them. And if that application is ranking score is greater than 50 points, then that application could be pre-approved for assistance. Pre-approval, I want to clarify, does not mean guaranteed funding. Requirements, application requirements that must be met. That includes the AGI, adjusted gross income requirement. There is also highly erodible lands and wetlands conservation requirements. Depending on if you're an entity, there may be necessary documentation regarding your membership. So if you've not worked with NRCS before, then our local office can support you and assist you to work with our sister agency, Farm Service Agency, to help get your records established. So we'll get you a identifier, which is called a SCIMS number. FSA will also work to create a farm record for you. And then they would proceed through assisting you with those application requirements such as AGI, Farm and Track, and HEL. I will say there are no payment limitations presently. Typically, we would have a total farm bill payment limitation. At this point, because we don't have a farm bill, we don't have a payment limitation, we still have a contract limitation. So that payment limitation piece may change if we get a new farm bill. So again, the application sign-up period is between the 18th and the 20th of this calendar year. Any questions, Libby, on? Okay, next slide, please. All right, so just a quick map of the area that we've identified to make available funding. So, it's nearly the entire, state of Florida, just a few areas outside on the Panhandle, and they're in South Florida. So, we will be making these slides available, and there is a list of counties on the next slide. So wanted to just make sure that, you have a list of the eligible, counties, or I should say counties targeted for that disaster assistance. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm gonna just run through the conservation practices. Now, Bianca and Diaz and Jason Strength, they also covered these. I'm going to cover them from the perspective of making an application for financial assistance. So here we have a practice which is the mulching. The applicable land use is cropland. We will be employing a practice payment cap. So the limit of a payment to a customer for a contract, or if you apply for more than one contract, would be a total amount of $50,000. So that is the limit of financial assistance for that practice. We are setting aside approximately $1 million targeted to support producers that need to reapply mulching or just mulch at all. So again, this is in the context of disaster assistance. Then the high tunnel system, there's also a payment practice cap there for $50,000. We're setting aside $1 million for that particular practice. I heard someone mention the practice 442 earlier. We're targeting those center pivots. And we're setting aside $8.5 million. So that's any applicable irrigated lands. There's no practice payment cap. Just wanted to say that if there are facilitating practices needed to support that irrigation system, that could be included as part of the plan that's offered for consideration. All right, so we heard a little bit about that emergency animal mortality management. So if there's an applicable facilitating practice needed, that could be included. But the funding, which is $500,000, is targeted towards that particular practice for mortality management. It's usually farmstead that we see this applicable practice implemented, but it could be any land use. All right, and then we have that bivalve aquaculture gear and biofouling control. So that's going to be submerged lands. And there is a payment cap for that, which is a maximum of $60,000. We're setting aside $1 million to support that particular practice. Before I jump to the next slide, Libby, any questions?
Amber, this is one. I wanted to take advantage of that we have the bivalve aquaculture, that it hit me that given the case that is a brand new practice, we are going to be hosting 2 outreach sessions. And the reason that we are splitting them into 2 is to make sure that we have oyster production type and how we're going to interpret it and go forward with this practice for oysters. And we will do a second session that it will be for clams, so that we want to make a distinction. Programmatically will be the same, but we want geography. So we're going to host one of the outreach sessions at the Wakala Center. The time we will be advertising that soon. And then another one that we already have a schedule, and we were going to advertise them both at the same time. So again, we want to split distinctively how we're going to interpret it and proceed with oysters as compared to clams as we go forward. But more details to come, and we will of course post this in our website as well. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Juan. Bianca, any questions?
No.
Oh.
And we do have, I think, have we been addressing the ones on the chat? I'm sorry, to make sure that we are not leaving anything pending as we go, because we have been addressing them as we go, unless we missed any here. And I
We,
would encourage, go ahead, please. What?
we are looking at the chat. And Bianca, are there any, or Libby, any questions regarding these slides?
Or anything
believe-
that we have not
Or
addressed?
anything?
So I believe we have been addressing the questions as they come. I do wanna, there is one question about roof plastic on a greenhouse. So NRCS does not provide assistance for a greenhouse specifically, just because, it's rigid and the tunnels must be covered by sheet roll material. I would say contact your local field office for just clarification if the structure really meets our requirements of a high tunnel system versus a greenhouse to determine if it's applicable for the specific applicant asking.
Okay, thank you, Bianca. Next slide, please. All right, to follow up with, our last, practices that we're targeting. So, for forest lands, and we are targeting woody residue treatment. And also, if needed, conservation practice 612 to, establish trees. And if there are any applicable facilitating practices for the woody residue or the tree establishment, those could be included in the plan offered for consideration. So that land use for those two practices, those core practices, is forest. There's no practice payment cap. And NRCS has set aside $10 million targeted to support woody residue and tree establishment on forest lands. Next we have, practice 384. So it's woody residue treatment. We just talked about it on forest, but targeting that for pasture land. And there's $2 million set aside for that. And was there anything about range?
No, so pasture and rangeland.
Pasture. So we did this slide was developed earlier before we agreed on including pasture and range for 384 woody residue treatment. So that's $2 million set aside for targeting woody residue treatment on pasture and range. No practice payment cap. And lastly, the question about those IPCs. So Walter was discussing that earlier, and here we have practice 590 nutrient management, and it's to be accompanied by conservation practice 595 pest management, or I should say, could you say the full name again, Bianca? Pest management conservation system?
Yes.
So it is to facilitate practice nutrient management. Applicable land uses, cropland, no payment caps, and that is $2 million that we have set aside in funding for that. All right. Any questions about?
There's questions in the chat, but they're not related to the content. I can circle back to them when we're ready.
So next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about early start waivers. So NRCS can make available an early start waiver to access the applicability, or the purpose of it is to grant a early start to address resource concerns related to the recovery from, pardon me, it says Hurricane Ian. I would say the agreement, the statement of understanding between NRCS and the customer is that this is not a guarantee of funding. This waiver does expire if we do not see contract obligation within 12 months. It is contingent on the work not having been started. And it must be completed. The actual work must be completed in a manner that meets NRCS standards and specifications. Next slide, please. So just wanted to provide a list of Conservation practices, right? We just reviewed them, but I wanted to make available here the list that could be applicable for early start waiver. So next slide, please. So listing here the conditions for these or approval of an early start waiver. So for a high tunnel system, the condition is that the applicant is using a high tunnel system kit. And the planner identifying the extent of the area damaged by the hurricane. With respect to animal mortality, we're looking at the condition is collecting a GPS point and the planned disposal site and evaluation of that 100-year floodplain setback. Now, when I am going through these, I would say that the local office and the field office is discretionary on approving these. So please, work with your local planners and, if there is a condition that is perhaps limiting approval, that may be the case. These are the general expectations for surrounding an early start waiver. So for woody residue treatment, it's conditional on the extent of the area damaged by the hurricane. Our planners will need to refer to our internal inventory and evaluation guidance to assess that damage on forest land. So we have an internal protocol that we will be utilizing to identify that damaged area. So just know that all of this is very much site specific, working with your field office planners and identifying the extent of that damage. So we also have that sprinkler system, which is really the extent of the damage for the hurricane. Mulching is a very similar, it's extent of the damage. With the mulching, you're going to want to photo document those damaged crops. Our field office will. If I would advise anyone interested in financial assistance to get their cameras out and get those pictures, it's just always very helpful in communicating to NRCS and also just for your records. And lastly, that pest management conservation system, it's conditional on the presence of existing trees on the site. Sorry, we have a call coming in. All right, we just had a computer, phone call coming in on one of our, monitors here. So lastly, the pest management conservation system, as Walter had mentioned, there needs to be the presence of existing trees on site. And, also the planner identifying the extent of that, damage by the hurricane. Next slide, please. We're just working through being able to move to the next slide. Thank you. All right, and so I just wanted to touch on for a moment these situations where producer may have already worked with NRCS and they installed one of those identified conservation practices through a financial assistance contract. So if you have worked with NRCS and you have a failed practice, please reach out to your field office. We have two different paths in which we can address or potentially address this failed practice. If the contract is still active, we can evaluate on a case-by-case basis the ability to modify the contract to reapply that practice. So I really just wanted to share that NRCS has a couple of paths. It depends on the if that contract is active or if it has expired. So your planner will be able to assist you with that to know if it's an active contract or if it's expired contract. And NRCS has various paths in which we can address that failed practice. So with an expired contract, producers can submit an application for financial assistance and compete for a new contract. So if it's active, we have a different path than if it is expired. So next slide. And any questions, verbal questions or questions in the chat over the material about applying for financial assistance, what's available for financial assistance?
There is a question, is there more funding anticipated than the 26 million for the amount of the counties that are involved in this program?
At this point in time, we have, that's the limited amount of funds that we have. If we are allocated additional funds, that could be the case. I would probably just pivot over to Juan for a moment if he has anything to add about additional funds for disaster assistance.
Yeah, thank you. And I did, I mean, I should have said that whenever I respond, it shows under Jason Hayford's name because I'm using his computer. But I did attempted to answer it, right? Like NRCS is using an allocated program funds, and we are using these funds to respond to these hurricane needs, right? Via implementation of these conservation practices. But as a clarification, we do not receive an appropriation for emergency funds. So that all that we're doing in NRCS in the state of Florida is that we receive our allocation like we do always, and we are carving a set aside from our own appropriated funds to exclusively dedicate them to the emergency relief, like we did with Ian and all of these. So, Ian, we set aside, I think it was maybe 12 million at the end or something like that, between 10 and 12. But that's how it works, right? But my commitment, of course, is supply and demand. If we see that the needs are far exceed the 26 million that we set aside, we will continue to seek additional funding. But please be advised that we are committed to request it. We don't know that we're going to get them. We are competing with resources with North Carolina, Georgia. I mean, there are other states as well that they will be in similar circumstances. But you do have NRCS Florida commitment that we are going to pursue additional funds to try to continue to help and assist the producers.
Thank you, Juan. Libby, any additional questions?
I saw a question from Dan that I think that we should cover, and Bianca, I sent you a text on a follow-up with forestry.
Oh, okay. So I just posted a response to Dan's question, but I will gladly take it vocal. So Dan, that is correct. This is applicable for the trees that will need to be reset. The only thing that you will need to document is the need for it, right? And documenting that they were existing, right? That this is not a new planting that's going to happen. We understand that there is a need to replace trees, but in that capacity, just document what was existing and what needs replacing for emergency purposes. Juan, I'm looking at my phone right now.
Yeah. Is related, is for Conrad, and is to see if Conrad can go over the
Okay.
So they're checking.
I believe that's correct, Juan. For the purpose of woody residue treatment, since it's a debris removal and practice that's being implemented to restore an ongoing forestry operation, I do not believe that a forest management plan is for that specific practice. But yes, with 490 and 612, we would need to have a plan on file or one developed to be able to continue with a contract for reforesting or doing anything that's going to be actively putting trees back into the operation.
And important that the plan does not have to meet NRCS standards at that stage. We need to have a stewardship plan on file. That is very, if
Yeah,
you don't
and
have one, we can help secure one, of course, but.
yeah, and also provide that criteria of what's needed in a forest management plan.
Excellent.
Right, so our programs do require us to, when we're offering technical assistance regarding forest land, to have a forest stewardship plan in place to document the need for the management practices or the practices that will be incorporated into that plan.
Correct, and we have resources available for those who might not be aware of both the resources that the Florida Forest Service has for forest management plans, as well as consulting foresters, if they want to go that direction, or even with a technical service provider, that we can provide to the client.
Thank you, Conrad. Any other comments that we need to address regarding the subject of stewardship plan for forestry land before I transition to a question in the chat? Thank you. Ken, if you don't mind, and Jason, I see you're muted, just in case you need to say anything. There's a question in the chat from Ken about what documentation do you need, just photos of it being existing or what? Can you clarify what the question is regarding?
Well, for the high tunnels, did you just need photos, or do you need anything from them being purchased, or design wise, or is it just photos of them existing?
No, that's a good question, Ken. When we're covering what is needed, is not necessarily needed from the client, right? We have staff as part of our team that they need to do ground proofing. So when it comes to what documentation is needed, this is really for awareness as participants apply to the program of what our field staff will need to confirm on site. So a site visit is encouraged so that they can confirm that there is an existing tunnel, right? When we're talking about high tunnel systems, is that there was one on site, that there's clearly a need for a replacement, right? Because the whole purpose of why we're doing high tunnels under emergency is to replace a structure that was existing that got damaged because of this, specific event. In that capacity, once the field employees go out and take a look that there is an existing structure that got damaged, what they need to do is, collect the information of the footprint, collect the information of the crops being grown so that we can document that it was functional at one point. And then with that information, it's up to the field staff to determine options available. And when I say options available, this kind of goes into what Amber covered earlier.
And they're gone again. So, as you can see, we continue to struggle with these network challenges in the state office. But let me, I wanted to, oh, so she's back. Go ahead, Bianca. So I see a question, or Mr. Greiner has the floor here. Go ahead, ask your question, please.
Well, I was just wondering, and she cut out on that, but she was providing information that for us or whomever the grower is to get with field staff, and then for them to document not only with photos, but that it was there existing in place.
Correct. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll be quick on that. So the information that we're providing through this meeting is really to be intended into having awareness of what our field staff will need to collect. So our field staff will be coordinating site visits to confirm, what information is needed. We're just trying to make sure the public is also aware of what they will be capturing when they're doing the site visit. So the staff will go out, take a look at the field, make sure that there's an existing structure, because we're talking about high tunnels specifically, that it got damaged because of hurricane related impacts. And then, in that capacity, come back to the office and determine what's the best route to proceed and communicate that to the client.
Thank you.
No, of course. Thank you. Any other questions?
Excellent discussion, folks. We're happy for you to have joined, and we want to make sure to afford you the time for any questions. And this is not the only bite of the apple. We want to make sure that if you have any further questions, please continue to work directly with your respective field offices. And in the website, actually, if you don't know where your office is, we do have in our website a map that shows all the locations in the state. So anyways, any additional questions that to give you the floor? With that, so I think that then any other remarks from NRCS that we may want to bring to the table before we call the meeting off? Okay, hearing none. Well, thank you all for joining the call. We very, very much appreciate the discussion. Please let us know how to improve these programs as we execute them. We know that these, as any given program, I know that paperwork sometimes can be unwieldy, but we ask for your patience as we go forward executing these. But we do want to do our best to help you recover from these hurricanes. And we hope that you spread the word of this availability so that people do take advantage of our programs. Keep questions, comments forward. You have our point of contact here. So with that, thank you very much, NRCS, for hosting the call. Great conversation this morning, and have a great day. And thank you for joining. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Juan.
Thank you.
Absolutely.